I once attached a microphone incorrectly to Richard Branson's bottom.
Welcome to Relevant Insights. Relevant Insights is a new podcast that we're putting together here at Relevant. Relevant is a company that helps professionals worldwide develop the skills they need to up-level their careers. And we do all this through challenges, which we call climbs, because we believe that everyone is climbing in their career, or at least we hope they are and want to help them in that endeavor. And this new podcast, Relevant Insights, is where we talk with interesting people around the globe that are either hiring managers or people that have gotten an interesting job in the international marketplace, and us really having a natural conversation with them just to discover some interesting things about their journey and share that, of course, with all of you. So today, you'll see I have a Nadia. Nadia, give us a wave there. Nadia is our marketing and PR person here at Relevant, and she's going to be participating with us today, and I'm looking forward to that. And the woman of the hour, even though we're not going an hour, Rosie, don't worry. The woman of the next 20 minutes is Rosie Cogill. Now, Rosie and I have been working together for too many years, I want to say. It's been a while, and I first met Rosie when she was living in Zurich, working for Evernote. I was doing Asia Pacific. She was doing the EMEA region. So with that, I will say hello, Rosie. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Now, where are you hailing from right now?
I am in the UK, as my accent might have given away. I'm in southeast England, in rural England, really, about an hour south of London. So this is home where I grew up, and it's home as of the last couple of years. But as you alluded to, we have known each other for nearly a decade, Troy. And I have spent quite a few years in Switzerland, a year in New York, and now I'm back home. So, yeah.
Yeah, what a journey. And why don't you tell us a little bit about, because I don't even know really fully this story. I know bits of it, but how did you end up in Zurich originally, being originally from the UK? And I'd also love to hear about how you got the Evernote job, because that's kind of cool that you were in Zurich and you got a job with a Silicon Valley company. Like, tell us all about how that journey happened for you.
A lot of serendipity, I think, is how that really happened. So I started my career in London. I worked at a place you might recognize, St. Paul's Cathedral. I worked there for a number of years, doing their events and their fundraising. And I got bored of that and thought I fancied a career in PR because it looked a bit more exciting. So PR led me to an agency in London where I started as an intern and worked my way up. And we work with entrepreneurs and startup founders, very similar to Phil Libin, really, but on the UK side of things, working on their profile and pitching them out to various publications for 2 years. And then we did this crazy thing that my now husband and I never do, which is take a risk. We went to a party. We met some friends from Switzerland who were British people who'd lived out in Switzerland for a number of years, banking mainly. And their wives had gone with them and also got jobs. And they just were really cool. And we thought, well, we don't have a mortgage. We don't have children. We don't have anything keeping us to the UK, apart from family who wouldn't really miss us because they can just get on a plane and an hour later they're in Zurich. So why don't we do it? So we literally made the decision almost overnight. And this is so not something we do as a couple. Like, we do not do risks. And we said, okay, this is January the 1st. This year we'll move to Zurich. We said maybe August, maybe September. By February, we were planning on moving.
Wow.
In April, I was there.
Wow.
I was seriously lucky. My husband, we basically played the game of who gets the job first. He got the job first. He doesn't normally win. I normally win. He got the job first. So I quit. I quit my job, and I thought, actually, it'll be okay. I've got a good CV. I was 25. I'd got sort of 4 or 5 years experience behind me. And I just thought, actually, why not? You don't get this opportunity.
Yeah, you'll figure it out, right?
Exactly. So we went, and it was so old school because he had to sign paperwork that said, and we were an unmarried couple. We'd been together 7 years. So but we were not married. He had to sign paperwork that said he would look after me and that he would pay for me. And that if I racked up any debts, they would be covered by him.
Well, hey,
so
that makes it official. Good for you, right? Talk about tying him down.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, it was great. So we arrived in the April. I had a very nice summer. I did some temp sort of consulting work actually, I did some stuff for Mondelez. So they bought Cadbury, the chocolate cheese. I mean, how quintessential is that? I turn up in Switzerland and I work for a chocolate and cheese sweets company.
Perfect. Yeah.
And then I just thought, actually, that wasn't PR, and I really wanted to do PR. So I went on LinkedIn Jobs. I looked at the logos. You know, on LinkedIn Jobs, the logos stand out to me.
Yeah.
Evernote's. Everyone says the green elephant. It's not. It's a grey elephant on a green background. Stood out to me, and I thought that's cool. Even better was that I didn't need to speak German or Swiss German.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted someone who was fluent in English. And I was really lucky. I interviewed. I met Troy and some other mutual colleagues, and off I went. So, yeah, I was with them from 2012. It was the Olympic year. I started with them. And 6-ish years later, I finished up and continued the journey with Phil. So there you go.
Wow. What a journey. What a journey. You were making a transition from events and that kind of thing into PR, right? At that point. So you kind of had to, how did you make the case that PR was going to be your thing?
Well, first of all, PR is professional blagging. So, I mean, I'd done 2 years of professional blagging. And you're completely right. I had 2 years PR experience. They wanted 2 to 5 years. I remember that really well because I remember applying thinking, there's no way I've got this. And there were 2 things on my CV that the hiring manager at the time picked out. One was skiing, because in that awkward bit at the end of a CV where you write your hobbies, I'm not really a hobbies kind of person, but skiing is a thing. I'd put skiing, and then one of the brands that I'd worked on in London was an organization called Startup Britain, which was copying Startup America. I don't know whether you remember that from 15 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. I can't think which administration it would have been, but they created a platform for businesses and entrepreneurs to go to. It was like the source of truth for all things that were great about businesses and building a business. So everything you'd need from the paperwork to the advice, kind of similar to the studio model that we now work for, Troy, but it was the sort of take all the rubbish out of it and make it really simple. And we created the British version of that. So I launched something called Startup Britain with our Prime Minister and some of the Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, I think you guys call it over there. So those entrepreneurs stood up and launched it to the world. And that was something that the hiring manager had watched and seen from afar. And because I had done the PR and put it on a very small bullet point on my CV, she said, that's really cool. I saw that. And that's what made me want to.
Oh, wow. So, very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was also my question. I mean, how to sell yourself as a professional and what kind of skills they are looking for. But basically, it's all based on personal communication, as you said, probably.
I think so. And now I've started hiring people. I have to say that you get so far with a good looking CV. And by that, I mean aesthetically pleasing CV. The next stage is, yes, there might be some interesting names of companies or projects that you've worked on that stand out. But honestly, the people that I want to chat to, and therefore I assume I must have come across like this, because I think it's a human nature thing, is you need someone who's instantly enthusiastic, instantly chatty, knows when to be modest, but when to also sell yourself, knows the balance of banter versus like professionalism, and effectively selling yourself as a person that you would want to be in those days, in the olden days, in an office with. Because in these small teams, especially, you're going to be interacting with these people continuously. It's not that you're just the HR person that will see them on day one and then never again. These are teams of like 10 people. And so if you've come to an interview, and actually this was a video interview, which just wasn't a thing all those years ago.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. And if you don't vibe and you don't come across as enthusiastic and genuinely wanting the job, then you're not going to be the one that gets through to the next round. I genuinely think it's so much about enthusiasm, and someone looking at the way you express yourself and thinking, I really want to learn more about this person, or I know the next question that's coming up, because you've got a conversation going rather than a Q&A, full stop, sit and wait for next question type of feeling, because that's awkward. And interviews are about understanding you could sit next to someone and have a glass of wine and a conversation with them and be interested to learn more.
Mm-hmm.
Very good insights. That's definitely for sure. And I think that human element is something that a lot of people seem to forget about, especially I know throughout Asia, this is something that people struggle with, is bringing the human element to the interview, as opposed to just the clinical setting of question, answer, but actually showing your human side. Kind of like you said, who would have known? Skiing is a little bit of a hook, and then it led to something that you did professionally that people were impressed by, right? So yeah, I think that human element is definitely a big, important element to bring to the table when you're interviewing. And right now I'm doing like partnerships and community, right? At mmhmm. And that's a big thing when you're doing partnerships. Similarly, so you have to bring a human element to it to get some sort of a connection to even further a conversation to the next stage. So I think it's very similar when you're interviewing for a job or hiring. So now we're in a situation where mmhmm has raised a large round of funding. I think 130 some odd million dollars that it's raised, barely a year old. So very, very quickly. And now you're put into a position where the tables are kind of turned, right? Like now you're the GM, the general manager of the European region. That's a heavy mantle. There's a lot of responsibility with that. And of course, building a team is huge in that regard. So I'd love to hear from you, like as you're building your team. I know you made a hire recently who's fabulous. Like, what do you look for in an interview? Once you see a CV and you say, yeah, this person looks interesting, how do you want that interview to go to get you excited about that person?
I mean, I did interview a number of people. So I mean,
you remember all of them by the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, you do actually, because you remember them for the fact that there were some good and there were some bad. I'd say that, look, the most important thing for me was that someone came on and understood what the product was. The number of people who joined an interview or one-on-one with me and didn't, let alone use a background and use a product that is all about video. They didn't use it, but they also didn't know. I mean, it sounds so basic. They didn't know about the product. So they had this epic CV of all. So I was hiring a PR manager, and I wanted someone who could manage a few PR agencies, so knew how to get the best out of an agency, but also would proactively pick up the phone to journalists and pitch our news story to journalists that they either knew or that they were building a relationship with instantly. So the rapport has to be there for that, but therefore, if they can't have a rapport with me, it's unsurprising that they wouldn't have much success with a journalist. So having someone who didn't understand what our product was, but was pitching for the interview, they'd have a CV that would have, the classic agency names on it, or that they'd done in-house at Google, at Facebook, and you'd be thinking, wow, this is a great CV. But if that person comes to the interview, and this did happen too many times, it was really surprising. The whole point of an interview is to flatter the company that you've bothered to research what the job is that you've applied for, right? Like that's
totally.
You prepare, right?
That's job number one, right? I mean,
yes, exactly. I didn't need a slide deck, but it would have been nice for the product to use. So the ones that stood out and the ones that got my attention beyond that 2 minutes, because I am fickle. If they had not used our product, and then when I asked them about the product, said some very wishy-washy answers about what it did, the next 25 minutes was just words, because I find it ridiculous, really, that someone would come so unprepared. So they were the ones that stood out for the wrong reason. they also, interestingly, were the ones that didn't do the short, sharp answers. And for a PR person who's probably done a bit of media training for a client, turning the answer around quickly enough, and this is ironic because this is a very long answer to your question, would be ridiculous, because they'd go off on a tangent of maybe nerves, but you just think, what was the question? What was the answer? Little bit of extra, stop and wait. And so I think it's really important that you've run through the likely questions with either yourself in front of a mirror, maybe yourself even on a voice note of some kind, so that you can hear yourself back. But 3, 4, 5 sentences, and stop and pause and wait for the next question to come. And with that, I'm going to sit and pause and wait for the next question to
come. Brilliantly so. Yeah, exactly. Those are great observations, just of what the hiring manager is thinking and looking for. I've noticed this a lot in my career as I've hired and interviewed, that the people that take the time to learn both about me and the company I'm representing, it goes so far, because it just seems like they care. And I think you were saying, enthusiasm is big. And I think a lot of the people, especially when I was at Evernote, I would do user meetups, and I would actually eventually hire a number of people from those actual user meetups, because I knew they had the enthusiasm for the product naturally. It wasn't a put on. It wasn't, something they were doing just for the interview. And then I would find people that had the skill backing that I needed to fill a particular role. And that was always a good combination, is that enthusiasm for the product coupled with the actual skills that you need. That's always a good combination. So that's very good for all of us to learn whenever you're interviewing, to make sure that you do your homework and make sure that you are showing enthusiasm for not just the role, but for the organization and what they're trying to do in the world. And I think, for me, one of the things that a lot of people miss is most organizations, if they're great organizations that you want to work for, they have a very specific point of view on how the world should be different, right? And they're going about the job of making that happen. So understanding that and bringing that to the table and showing that you're kind of a similar mind in that vision, I think goes a long way also.
I totally agree. And actually, the person I hired in the end ended up pointing out, and rightly so, she's in PR. She read the last 3 articles that we'd had in the news. I mean, sensible decision.
Homework, yeah.
Yeah. But she ended up pulling out the point that we are a distributed team. So we distinguish ourselves. Let me find it here.
Yeah, and this is just from our blog, from other PR things, right? Like that we're putting out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all public. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's nothing that we're discussing in our all hands that's secret. This is, as you say, this is a point of view that us as an organization, led by our CEO and led by people on the executive committee, that all believe that this is the company that we're creating. And we distinguish between distributed and remote. We're purposefully not remote. We are a distributed team that is a global team, and so all of our job applications are global job openings.
Yeah.
Remote being this person, and distributed being what we aim for. So
yeah, she
came to this interview saying, she said to me, it feels quite strange that I'm going to, I can't remember what the question was, but I sort of, why this role, and does it scare you that this role you're going to be going to is not going to have an office? We don't have an office. We are distributed. We're all over the world.
Yeah.
And she said, well, it feels a bit strange that I'm about to answer the question like this, because it sort of suggests that I want to travel a lot. But I have a boyfriend in Istanbul. I'm from Germany. I live in Dusseldorf at the minute, but I'm going to be coming back to London. And actually, I need a setup that allows me to have my life and exist in the way I want to, but also this job stood out to me as the right step for my next career. She used to be an agency. She wanted to come in-house. This was the role. And she just said, but it feels really strange that I'm telling you that, but actually.
And that was the perfect answer, right? For you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. Because she'd read up about the company. She knew that this was the thing that Phil was talking about a lot in the media, and therefore the company had a mantra about it, and she played to it. It's great.
Yeah, that's just the real interest, that the person has. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is a perfect segue into having you explain what a global company is and why it's kind of a newish thing, but we believe that it's going to go on for quite some time. It becomes kind of the new way to work. I mean, we literally don't have a headquarters, right? Like we used to have a big office in San Francisco, one in Tokyo, one in Paris. There were actually physical locations you could go to and be with people. We don't have that anymore. So why don't you talk a little bit about just kind of like, because I think that dynamic is changing worldwide. And I think it's creating a huge opportunity for people that want to work in more internationally oriented careers.
Absolutely. And I mean, to be clear, I personally believe that this is exactly how you build the best companies, because you're not limiting yourself to talent that is 10 miles around the Bay Area and is an engineer. I mean, that's such a sweet spot of a person. Troy, you were talking about the kind of people that you used to hire that had already gone to the Evernote conference and therefore were a fan. And then, I mean, what you're trying to find there is a very sweet spot of a person.
Yeah.
And actually now we can find our whole job pool is global. So, I mean, you're right. We have no offices. We actually got rid of the offices pre-pandemic. About 6 months before the pandemic started, we had already got rid of our offices, and we've all become distributed. So the company's really keen to point out that this isn't a money-saving exercise. We've actually all been given what we're calling a distributed facilities budget, which allows us to all create our own setup. So our CEO has joined a business members club. He can swim between Zoom meetings. He can meet like-minded people on the Sun Lounger, or he can take his Zooms from the business lounge. And this allows him to not be in San Francisco. He's moved to Northwest Arkansas, and we're all encouraged to do the same thing. This is what we're talking about as a company: work where you have the best job and live where you have the best life. And I think that's pretty amazing position for a company to be in. And I would advocate for any other company to have that same consideration of, why do we tie ourselves to a location where the CEO says to you, right, okay, for 2 hours of every day, you need to sit in a car, sit on a train, be stressed. It's bad for the environment. You're paying a fortune because you're traveling in peak hours. You're not seeing your family. You're either seeing them for breakfast. You might see them for bedtime for 5 minutes if you're lucky, if you've got children. But effectively, you're running your whole life around going to an office to what? Sit there. And yes, there are many aspects that are brilliant about having colleagues in situ, but for 5 days a week, for 8 hours strictly between 9 to 5 a day, really? And if you think about the way that we're working, that companies are working backwards into what does it look like post-pandemic, these discussions are continuing, and they're building up pace, because employees are now saying, hang on, no, why are you, like, what we did before isn't the way that we should be.
Why ruin a good thing, right? Like, there's a lot of positive. Yeah,
totally. And it's not about what we used to do, it's about what we should be doing. So we talk about doing the right things in person, and the right things on video. And I mean, I wouldn't work for a company that did it any other way now. I just wouldn't.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot at Relevant about skills of the future, right? Like what skills are professionals going to need to develop as part of this kind of new future story? And I think you're hitting on a few of those, right? The ability to recognize what's good in situ together and what is good to just let people work and not commute and not mess with all, you just painted a horrible picture, but that was my life when I lived in the Bay Area. I was commuting for at least 3 hours a day, sometimes 4, depending on when I left. And that to me, and it was just something we all accepted blindly, because that's the way our fathers and mothers did it from times past, right? Which was just kind of like, why not rethink those things? And I think one of the major skills of the future that executives and professionals need to learn is how to operate on video, how to be compelling on video. We call it professional video presence, right? that I think is a key, just a key skill for people to learn. And most people don't have it. Most people haven't thought about it. It's something that you have to thoughtfully curate and build. And I think that the pandemic has definitely thrust us into a spot where people suddenly realize, oh, this is important and something I need to do. You, when you got your job in Zurich, you did a video interview. Who would have known that it would have like gone 100% that way, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Phil talks about it being similar to the dot-com boom and the fact that video is here to stay, and that this movement would have probably taken a decade to see itself out. Yeah. We're at the point now where it's probably 2 to 5 years, and we're halfway through that already. And you're completely right. People who are applying for jobs now are pitching in a completely different way than they would be if they were going for a coffee, or they were meeting the HR manager, or they were doing it in those face-to-face terms. And as you can tell, it's bath time outside. I don't know whether the screaming.
Bath time. I've been there before.
Great. So yeah, it's completely different. And whether you're pitching for cash as a startup founder, or you're pitching yourself, looking the part, saying the right thing, and not having the awkwardness of, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Am I sharing the right slides? Have I, like, all of these things can be so stressful. And why make it more stressful when actually all you need to do is sell yourself and make people interested to hear more? And I think that's here to stay. And I wouldn't ever think that would have been the case after having that video interview first time. But I mean, look, here we are. And I think we embrace it and we get on with it.
Here we are. And you're at a company that's kind of changing how people think about video and how people use video. So that's kind of a big transition. Nadia, I've been talking way too much. Any questions from your side regarding the hiring component?
I'm so excited just to hear all the Rosie's experience. And like, to me, talking about the skills of the future, I would say we also got to learn how to manage remote teams. Also, like, not controlling people physically, but just using all these different tools. And also it builds trust in your team, in your people, and also can help create much better places to work and much better companies. Yeah, that's and the pandemic, the good thing about it is that it also shows us the new way how we can work and communicate remotely. Because I also I'm an international professional, so I'm working with like different companies in different countries, like in Moscow, Russia, in Asia, in the US, and with Troy we are not in the same city, but like still all the processes are running, and we have like a successful team. So I feel like that's the new world, and that's the new skills we got to learn. And also, Rosie, as I understood, you a little bit changed the field you're working on, right? Because you started as a PR manager in Evernote, and then chief of staff in All Turtles, right? And then general manager. Could you please tell a little bit more about this? Like, if someone wants to change their professional field, what's the best way to do that? Do you need to learn like different skills or upgrade your skills along the way?
It's a good question. So I did PR for 8 years, perhaps six to 8 years. And then I moved with Phil. So Phil left Evernote, and then we stayed in touch. And he set up All Turtles, which is the product studio that hatched this product, as well as 9 or so other projects. And it needed someone to organize stuff. And so I had established that what I liked about the role I did was meeting people, being able to sort of not sell, but sort of warm people up to the idea of what you wanted to talk to them about, and them to get as excited as you were about something. And I'm an organizer. And so I knew that I wanted to add another string to my bow. I didn't want to become my very first boss always told me that the smartest thing you can do is know what the next job is after the one that you're going to get. So always know what your second job is. Mm-hmm. So as you start to climb up the ladder, you start thinking about what the end goal is, if you like, if that's the way you're motivated. So I knew that if I was thinking in that kind of trajectory, a global comms officer was not the role I wanted. Don't tell anyone, but I can't write. I always got interns to write press releases. I can't write a press release. So I knew at some point I'd be found out. And I knew that I liked the organizing, the events element of what I was doing. So it was kind of like, it was probably something I read somewhere. And I said to Phil, do you need a chief of staff? Because it looks kind of like a thing I could do. And he said, yes, I need to hire one person and we'll call you that. You'll do a bit of my PR. You'll organize my life, my work life, and off we go. So I would say that if you know what the next step is, you can mold what you're doing. You don't need to. I haven't completely stepped to something completely new at the minute. I'm general manager, but I've got a big foot in the camp of marketing and PR. I've got another side of things, which is partnerships. I haven't got rid of one thing to start something new. I've just sort of added another couple of things. And to be like, if you think about it in terms of sort of grading, I'm a higher grade in PR than I am in partnerships, but they have really transferable skills. And so as long as I've got the right people above me showing me how to do things and showing me best practice, because if you haven't worked in that environment, you don't know what the right way to do things is to start with. You take the transferable skills, you add the extra bit, and with a bit of blagging, you supposedly succeed. You never know.
No, that's great. I love that. And one of the things that sticks out to me is that conversation you had with Phil. You probably focused on some of his problems that he needed to solve for, right? Like you identified up front, like, yeah, this is probably, there's probably these gaps that he has in what he needs to accomplish. And you can kind of present yourself as, hey, this, I have these transferable skills. These things I'll need to learn. These things I bring to the table. But if you work with me, I can solve this problem for you, right? And it seems like that's a good tactic or a good way to get a hiring manager very interested in having that conversation with you. And it is a conversation. I've done this with many jobs that I've had in the past that I've gone for. And it is a fluid conversation. But I always find that if I'm trying to identify those gaps or those problems that I could solve uniquely for a hiring manager, that you can kind of create your own position in a way, which is what you did with chief of staff. Hey, this is what we'll call you. And then you negotiated, okay, this is what I'll do, right? And all those things solved problems for him, which is a great way to go about it.
Absolutely true. And I even said, and by the way, I don't write. I'm not good at writing, but I will launch your company because I'm good at picking up the phone to journalists, but just don't get me to write the blog that goes alongside it. So it's, it's owning what you're good at, and it's accepting that you're not great at everything. And it's also trying to not be all things to all people, because you're never going to succeed at that. Like,
yeah, totally true.
It's never going to work.
That's a fool's errand, but it's what I find is people that are earlier in their career keep trying to go down that road. Mm-hmm. And then there comes a time where you kind of say, okay, I'm great at this, but I need to just acknowledge that I'm not great at that. And you know what? You can always solve for that thing that you may not bring to the table. You, Rosie, have always surrounded yourself with great writers, and that fills that gap. And then you're able to accomplish all the great things that you do. So I think that's an important part of maturing in a career, is understanding those things that you may not be good at, and that you realize, and I'm not gonna be good at them. That's not the plan, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's really cool.
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, this has been very, very helpful. A great conversation. I think learning both from your experience personally, but then also you in this role as a hiring manager, bringing on a lot of people and hearing about the person that you just hired, how they kind of caught your eye and brought that human element to the table, as well as understanding the company and the vision of the company that they're interviewing for. I think all of that is really important for all of us to hear and think about and practice as we go out and try to kind of upskill and get better at communicating our value to a company and how we fit in with a company. So this has been a very fun and I think informative conversation for us. And I just want to thank you, Rosie, for coming on. This is our first episode of doing this. And just like the name says, relevant insights. I think we have sussed out a number of relevant insights for people's career and career trajectory that came out of this discussion. So I just want to say a big thank you for doing this with us. And I know that the people that listen to this will definitely learn a lot. So thanks.
Yeah,
You're too
thank
kind.
you so much.
Thank you. No, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, before we let you go, one last question. What is the craziest experience that you've had in your career? Just, it could be anything. It could be related to jobs. It could be related not to jobs. Like, what is the craziest experience that you have had over the course of being a PR manager, going into more management roles, and now where you're at? Think about it.
I mean, I once attached a microphone incorrectly to Richard Branson's bottom.
Well, that sounds sufficiently crazy. And
there we go.
Yeah. And I'll bet you that's something you'll never forget.
He's definitely forgotten it, though. So, yeah, that's the main thing.
Oh, that's amazing. And that's the cool thing about PR is you get to work with people like Richard Branson occasionally, right? Like really amazing people. So I'm sure that you've had some amazing experiences.
It's totally true. I mean, I'm not advocating for a career in PR, but you literally the role that you have means that you're instantly with the C-suite because they're the people that you're profiling. So you might be just taking the minutes. You might be getting the glass of water and you might be finding a coat hook to put their coats and their bags on. But you're hanging out with these people. And I was really lucky to fall into that in my mid-20s and continue with it. And yeah, that's how you're invited to put microphones on world-renowned entrepreneurs who've now been to space. I mean, and
on their own creation, right? Which is just absolutely amazing. Well, that is all awesome. I want to thank you for joining us and kind of having this conversation. I hope that it helps a lot of other people. And this is our first take at Relevant Insights. So I hope all of you enjoyed it. And we will see you all next time. Thank you so much, Rosie.
Thank you. Bye, both of you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, we'll see ya.